Ahoy, ahoy! Captain Donna doing more Naxxramas neutral cards, Hearthstone video series. Going to talk about class synergies on Naxxramas cards. Doing Plague Quarter right now, and let's do the Gargoyle. Stoneskin Gargoyle. Card I'm not really seeing discussed much. I don't think people have really figured out what kind of deck it works in and what it's good for yet. It's kind of a funky card. It's a 3-drop. It's a 1/4, and it has this persistent ability that at the start of your turn, return this minion to full health. So if your opponent can't kill it, then it gets healed back to full. It's kind of like a light well, except it always hits itself, right? It's weird. The body's weird. You know, 1/4 is great on a 2-drop in certain situations. It's not nearly as good on a 3-drop, especially with 1 attack. It's not really killing that many things. You know, 3-drops don't really kill it, except for a few that have 4 attack. But it's kind of a weird card. I don't think I've seen it in any decks. I don't think I've played a single game against it yet, and I think it's because it's one people don't totally understand, and perhaps I don't totally understand it yet either. The common consensus is that it sucks and it's irrelevant, but as we've found in Hearthstone, there is no card that totally sucks except the Magma Rager. Let's take a look at the classes. Let me bring it up here. So, the Gargoyle. With Druid, I think with all the ping classes, and there's with the what's the other card that's a 1/4? The Web Lord, right? There is a little bit of synergy in that it can usually hit something that has, you know, that's got the 1 health and kill it. Okay, that's rare, but it can hit a 3/2, and your hero power can finish the 3/2 off, and you survive. So Druid's got that, Mage has that, Rogues has that. And so it's just that extra little 1 damage that for lower level minions, right, usually until you get into the 4-drop range, this is something that's going to survive. I don't really know if it's something you would innervate out, like you would ramp it out on turn 1. Maybe. The health would be nice, because they're probably not going to be able to remove a 4 health minion on turn 1, but the 1 attack isn't really going to do a lot for you. Maybe comboed with the hero power can kill a 2-drop, a 3/2 the next turn, and then come back to full. It's okay, I guess. That's okay. But I think the real value that Druid has is to be able to give it taunt. If this card gets buffed, it can become powerful. If you can bring its big downside, which is the lack of attack power, if you can bring that up, then the card can become pretty decent, you know? You know, you're talking about a turn... Geez, even then, though, it's a turn 4. If you drop it on... If you coin it on turn 3 and then buff it on turn 4, you're talking about, you know, a 3/6 taunt that regenerates itself, you know, that won't die. So I think that's, you know, I think that's interesting. Taunting it with Mark of Nature could be interesting, because if it's a taunt and they just don't have enough damage on the board to get through it, then it's going to regenerate itself and get strong again. And so, okay, that's kind of cool. Buffing with Power of the Wild, maybe. You know, when you put the taunts on it, when you raise its health at all, then it becomes stickier. And if you can put this minion in a place where it's not going to be commonly killed by things, then it can become a minion that has some value for, like Druids like. Power of the Wild, Savage Roar. They like minions that stay around because they need those bodies to maximize the value that they get out of those spells, you know, out of their killer combos with Roar and the stat gain through Power of the Wild. You know, Druid's taunts, they're the bigger taunts, your Druid of the Claw, your Ancient of War, your Iron Barks. You know, putting it behind a taunt, I mean, there's not a ton of value there. It's one health, right? Or it's one attack, right? There's not that much that it's going to be killing. I think with Druid, the cards that really work with it are going to be your buffs. Poison Seeds, right? You know, it's kind of just a trash minion that you would throw into that. There's no real benefit there. There's no death rattle or anything. You know, maybe it could help mop up after a swipe, like something has 2 health and it survives, and then so you kill it, and then, you know, it comes back to you and regenerates the next turn. I don't know. The taunt stuff is by far the most valuable because I think this is a card that you really have to buff the attack power on to get it to be good, and the classes that can do that pretty well. Or can do that pretty well. The classes that can do that are the ones that are going to synergize a little better. With Hunter, there's no beast synergy, so you're not going to be seeing any of, you know, you're not going to see any of the cool Hunter stuff that they can do. Hunter's Mark, I think, is limited also. I mean, yeah, there is some attractiveness in bringing it down to 1 health, right? But Hunter's Mark gets a lot of value on cards that are really big, you know, stuff with like 5 health and above. And usually those things are going to have a high enough attack to kill this. Maybe the dream combo here would be Hunter's Mark on a Senjin Shieldmaster, right? Put it on the Senjin, you run the Gargoyle into it, kill it. That's a big card, that's a big trade. And then if they're not able to deal with, you know, and then, well, I'd say, and then your Gargoyle survives. If they're not able to deal with that, because they just play another minion with no charge, it's pretty common, right? Then you get your 1/4 back. So it can be a little annoying. It can be a little annoying in that regard, which is kind of cool. It can be sort of a weird shield for misdirect, right? If they're attacking with a 3/2, maybe thinking that it's an explosive trap, or like a 2/1 minion that's just trash that they think is an explosive trap, or they don't care about it getting sucked up with a freezing trap. If it's misdirection, it goes, it bounces off this thing, and you know, that would be on their turn. So then on your turn, you would get a fully healed Gargoyle back. I mean, it's a little undercut by the 1 attack, right? So, okay, big deal. You did 1 free damage to it. Not really a huge thing. Snipe usually lays minions pretty low, especially in the early game. It either kills them or brings them to 1 health, so maybe there's a little synergy there. If you could pull... I'm trying to think of ways that you could pull value out of 1 health. The only card that buffs it is going to be Animal Companion if you pull Leok, right? Because now it's a 2/4 that regenerates. That's pretty good for knocking down their 3/2s, but I mean, you're talking about a 1 in 3 chance on that card. Maybe it can augment, you know, kind of like a lot of the cards that just do 1 damage and don't have a lot of drawback to it. It can augment a multi-shot, an explosive shot, you know, the minions that survive. You can do 1 more damage to and maybe continue to get your minion out of it. But because they don't have any way to buff it, that I don't think it's that good for Hunter. There's not a lot of combos with it. Even you would think Hunter's Mark is a good one, but even that I think is pretty limited. Stuff that this card would be able to kill that wouldn't be able to kill this card, right? That hits for less than 4 attack is not stuff you usually Hunter Mark anyway. It's usually going to be like a 3/2 or a 2/3 or something like that. Mage has a little synergy with the hero power, right? It's 1 more way to do 1 extra damage. It can be, I would suspect this card can be a little annoying to get rid of, and it'll probably be ignored by your opponent on the turn that it comes out. And so Mage can kind of use that to do an additional damage, have a little more push with the hero power, with Arcane Missiles, with Arcane Explosion, maybe even with Frostbolt or something. You know, Duplicate, not a great card to duplicate because it's not very strong. And Mage doesn't have any cards that buff anything, right? They don't have any plus attack or anything. They just have cards that synergize within the class set with the different spells. Kirin Tor with the secrets, Sorcerer's Apprentice with everything, and Mana Worm with, you know, the nightmarish openers that you can see for mages. This card doesn't add much to the spell game, and it's not a powerful enough minion to really contribute to you know, burning your opponent down if you're trying to rip them down on lethal with fireballs and stuff like that. I don't know. I think the only synergy it really has with Mage is that it's got the... is that, you know, it can kill a polymorph target and heal, right? Or it can, you know, maybe do that 1 extra damage on Kona Cold. It's the synergy with... it's giving the Mage's spells a little more reach, giving their hair power just a little more reach, and depending on, you know, the minions that you're taking down, you could do that turn after turn after turn and have this thing never die. Mage doesn't have any way to heal their minions, so... oh, that's okay. That's okay. Let's talk about Paladin now. Now, Paladin is I think we're looking at decent in Paladin here, right? Because it's a little higher health. It's coming a little later than a 2-drop, which a Paladin really likes, the 2-drop 1/4. But, well, that's a totally different discussion. It doesn't really. But so you got your 3-drop 1/4. It's probably going to survive. But Paladin has ways, unlike the other classes, to really offset its lack of offensive ability. Blessing of Might is a big one, and Blessing of Might, Blessing of Kings, those both buff. But even the Sword of Justice, right? Sword of Justice is actually pretty good on this card because 5 health is definitely significant. If you coined out Sword of Justice for turn 3, you drop the Gargoyle on the next turn. So you're looking at, okay, turn 4, I got a 5 health thing that does 2 damage. That can take a hit even from like a Shield Master or a Yeti or something, and still survive. And if I can make it back to my turn, then I'm going to have, a full health minion. That's kind of cool. Yeah, you can get down with that. The Equality negates its entire healing ability because it doesn't have anything to heal, right? And Redemption would just bring a 1/1 back, so that sort of sucks. Repentance, maybe it's okay, right? It's got the 1 attack. When Paladins can bring things down to 1 attack, they get a lot of value out of minions that only have 1 attack, because typically the rest of the stat budget or the mana budget or whatever is put into other things on that card. So Repentance, it's okay, but it's really about buffing. If you can get a Blessing of Might on it, it's a pretty good card, right? 4/4. You get a Blessing of Kings on it, real good. The Divine Shield plays with the Protectors and your Hand of Protection, not as important, I think, unless you can get it buffed, right? You have to be able to give it some kind of damage that it can do. The Paladin Secret Avenge, right, which hasn't been released yet, so I can't show it to you. That is, that card has a decent interaction with it. When you drop a Gargoyle on turn 3, your opponent, I don't think, they're either not going to be able to kill it or they're not going to care about killing it because it's just a 1 damage. Maybe against Paladin they would try to, but let's say they couldn't. That's not unrealistic that they just couldn't remove it on that turn. If you have Avenge up from a previous turn and you have a little 1/1 that's there, maybe they kill your 1/1 instead or something like that. Now Avenge flops onto this. You're talking about a 4/6 that regenerates itself. Very powerful. This card can get really strong if it can get buffed, but I think it needs to get buffed to be any good. So Paladin's got some decent stuff. Sword of Justice, Blessing of Might, I think, are the standout things. But other than that, yeah, that's about it. It's tough because this is one of the better classes for it, I think. Turn into Priest, they have 4 health. It doesn't, strangely enough, it doesn't really synergize with their hero power because it's going to heal itself anyway. It does in the regard that, like a Lightwell, but this can attack. So maybe you're going to send it over, it's going to hit something, it's going to take 1 or 2 damage or maybe 3 damage on your turn. So then it's left as a 1/1 or a 1/2 on your opponent's turn. They might be able to knock it down then, versus when, and then you get it back and it heals back up. So maybe you do want to heal it on your own turn just to prevent your opponent from killing it on their turn. It really depends on what their board looks like, but it's a little decent, I think, with the hero power that's there. It's got the 4 health, the low attack, so you start to get attracted to maybe a early Inner Fire Divine Spirit. Those aren't terrible cards on it, because again, if it gets buffed, it can become powerful. It can become decent. You just need to have some kind of attack power that goes onto it. And so maybe putting it to a 4/4 that heals every turn that's cool, right? Inner Fire. So maybe that's there. It's just like everything with Inner Fire and Divine Spirit, you have to decide, is that the card that I really want to invest those cards in the deck? Those are usually really important cards in priest decks that use them, and so using it on a 1/4, Maybe, right? If you really think you can protect it. Power Word Shield is a little limited because it just brings it to a 1/6, right? This card is super good on Northshire Cleric because it gives you more health that you can play with to heal to draw cards. Here, it's going to heal anyway, and so it doesn't add anything to the attack power, so I don't think you're going to see the power words going on it that much. You could whack it with your own shadow form. That'd be fun, right? Lightwell doesn't do anything because it's not going to heal. It's going to heal the full anyway. You know, Valen's healing buff doesn't do much to it. It doesn't survive a Soul Priest sweep, so that's not nearly as important. Yeah, there's not really a lot in Priest. You know, it's got less than 1 health, so if you're playing against it as Priest, you know, your Shadow Word is enabled, your Shadow Madness is enabled. You could yank it with the Cabal Shadow Priest, but I mean, geez, you got to ask yourself, is this something you really even care about taking? Shadow Madness, you know, a 1-drop, you know, 1-drop, a 1 damage target, probably not even that much synergy on the offensive side. Temple Enforcer, giving it the health, it's the 1 power. You know, the 1 power is tough, and Priest doesn't have any good ways to buff that except Inner Fire. You know, yeah, if you could turn it into a 7/7, that would be pretty good, but you know, I don't really feel it. It's got, you know, Circle of Healing doesn't do anything. I don't think there's much going on for a Priest with this card. Looking at Rogue, the higher health, maybe a Cold Blood situation. It suffers from the same problem that it doesn't have much attack, and so, you know, putting it into, you know, concealing it, you know, what is that really going to do realistically? Maybe it gives Blade Flurry a little more reach because it can do 1 more damage to something. Same thing, all of Rogue's removal, right? It gives maybe that 1 extra damage because it's a minion that typically your opponent is going to ignore or not really care that much about because it's so non-threatening. So you can maybe tack it onto a backstab on your turn, maybe onto a Blade Flurry, maybe onto an Eviscerate target, you know, to stretch it to 5 damage instead of 4. But you know, Rogue, they have ways to damage their own creatures. That doesn't really matter. It's not particularly cheap, so it's not even that great of a combo with Van Cleef. And it's not, you know, even the return to minion hand combos, right? Your Kidnapper and your Ambusher. The Brewmaster techs are kind of good because they can heal a higher health minion. You think, well, maybe 4 health, right? You know, you hit 1 thing and it's down to half its health. You fill it back, drop it again. You know, but this card heals, if it can survive a round of turns, then it heals to full anyway, right? That's essentially what you try to do with combos that bring it back to your hand, so you can put it down. That heals it in the way that you resummon it, but this card does that anyway. You know, I think the only thing it could really work with is Cold Blood, because it's going to be maybe an overlooked target, and so that'll increase the odds that it'll still be on the board when to throw Cold Blood on or something. But you know, again, Cold Blood is typically something that you're going to put on, you know, charge minions or minions that don't die when they hit something like an Argent Squire, because that's how you get the value out of that card. Either it's usually part of a lethal combo or it enables a very favorable trade for you. So, you know, maybe this does, right? A 5/4 you flip it up to, kill Ascension and survive and heal itself back up. I think, okay, maybe it would be okay with Cold Blood, but that's really about it. I don't really see anything else in Rogue other than stretching their spells a little more. In Shaman, it, you know, I think Shaman's actually okay. Yeah, you know, Shaman, they're hamstrung a little by the randomness of the things that they have to do. Forked Lightning is random as far as the targets that it hits. Lightning Storm is notoriously random because it doesn't always have a set damage. So having 1 additional damage that can come in there and maybe even survive, right? Something that's probably going to be on the board not bad, right? You can come in and use it for that extra point of damage that on that lightning storm that was a little light or something like that. It can go just a little further with forked lightning. Now, Shaman does have an ability to give it taunt, right? The restore health to full, that doesn't really do anything for it because it's usually going to be restoring itself to full. But giving it taunt's cool, right? You know, it becomes a gorilla. It becomes a silverback patriarch, right? Just it's one that regenerates, and so that's okay. I mean, the silverback patriarch kind of sucks because the one attack. I mean, what's it gonna do, right? You know, Rockbiter. Even Rockbiter falls off a little bit here because this is a card that you want to be around for a while. I think the value in the Gargoyle comes from it being alive for a lot of turns to maximize the amount of heals that you get out of it for free, right? You don't have to invest anything at all into healing this card. It does it by itself, and that's where the value comes from. So Blessing of Might in Paladin set I think is decent because that's a permanent buff. Rockbiter's a one-turn kind of buff, right? And so you could use it to trade up, and then it would heal itself back up, but it's still going to be stuck at that 1 health, right? You know, which makes your Wind Fury's not going to be that good because it's so low. Putting it behind the taunt, you know, either with the Earth Ellie or Feral Spirit, you know, that's a real good way that Shamans protect the cards. That's not that great either. But it's still good for Flame Tongue, right? And it's still good for Bloodlust. You know, Bloodlust is just as long as if there's a minion and they're likely to stay around, then they're going to be good for Bloodlust because that's the threat that comes from that card. You know, it's 3 attack. Any attack that the actual minion has, that's pretty much gravy on top of that. And Flame Tongue's kind of the same deal. Maybe you can actually do some decent trades now. It's a 3/4. That's not bad stats, especially for like, you know, turn 3. For like turn 3, turn 4, even turn 5, right? That's not too bad. It just, you know, you have to have it where they don't kill the Flame Tongue. It's just kind of a double whammy that's there. So Shaman's okay, just because I think of how it can combo with their direct damage to clean up a little bit more. And Rockbiter, I guess, but that's not as good as I thought that it was. Let's look at Warlock. It's not a demon. No sack pack. It's just, you know, someday we're gonna get a card. Actually, there is a class card coming for Warlock that is a demon, but yeah. So I mean, this card, you know, there's no reason, you know, Mortal Coil, right? Sometimes you Mortal Coil your own minions to draw a card. Well, this one would eliminate the entire value of this, right? Because you would never just Mortal Coil at one time. You would always Mortal Coil kill it, so that doesn't do anything for you there. That's going to be pretty unlikely. Soulfire kills it, but that's going to be really unlikely to use it. Power Overwhelming, you know, overrides its healing ability. There's a little value here because of the 4 health that it's, you know, will survive a turn, so you have it out there so you can Power Overwhelming it. You know, it's a Power Overwhelming target that doesn't need charge to get the value out of Power Overwhelming. But you know, it dies at the end of the turn. This is the minion that, to get the value out of it, you don't really want it to die. You want it to survive for a long time. So I think Power Overwhelming kind of cuts back on, you know, certainly the persistent magic ability of the card, and that's kind of what you pay the mana for too. So I don't think Power Overwhelming is not that great. Same reason I don't think Void Terror is that great for it either, right? Because you can kill it, sure, but then you're not getting the value of its healing ability, and its stats aren't even that great, right? I mean, Void Terror would turn into a 4/7 on, you know, if you coin out the Gargoyle, it's probably going to survive. Next turn, Void Terror comes out on turn 3, a 4/7. That's pretty beefy, right? That's pretty big. It's going to be able to kill anything on the board for like 2 more turns. You're going to get a 2, maybe a 3 for 1 out of it, and so I take that back. Then yeah, maybe it is a decent Void Terror target. It's nice to pump the damage of Void Terror up a little more than that, but For an early drop, for a turn 3 drop, 4 power is enough, right? It's not too bad. You know, drain life, you could use it as drain life to get 2 damage back, but you know, if it's a situation where there's nothing out to drain at all, you would always drain your opponent's face, right? Because this does damage to the hero as well. You know, it'll heal back with Demon Fire, but I don't know why you would ever waste that card. Shadow Flame, pretty weak, right? It's only got the 1 attack, so that's not doing very much. It can heal off the Dread Infernal damage. That's kind of cool. You know, I don't know how much board influence a 1/4 on turn 6 and beyond is gonna be, but you know, it's there, I guess. It's a 1-drop with Summoning Portal. I guess that's cool. You know, it survives Hellfire, and maybe that is worth mentioning, right? Hellfire you're typically going to use to wipe out your opponent's board. It's Warlock's sweep, right? But your guy survives it, and then your opponent usually in response to Hellfire is going to put down their next batch of minions, right? Because Hellfire usually takes all of your turn, you wipe their stuff out, it's their turn, they put down whatever minions they want, comes back to your turn, you got a 1/4 again. But so that it's hamstrung a little because it's only 1 attack, but it's nice, you know. It's nice that something is a full health minion post Hellfire. There's a little bit of synergy link up there. Okay, you know, that's something at least, right? A warrior, I mean, a warrior is a class that likes damaged minions, and it likes the ability to be able to damage minions and have them survive. This card, I think, fits in line with that. It's the 4 health means it's thick, not thick, but a 4 health on the early drop means that it's going to be harder to kill, and it's going to be less threatening and more likely to be left alone because it only has 1 attack power, right? And so that means that, you know, you can kind of interrage for free, right? Because you get the damage, you know, you get the health back on it. You can Taskmaster it without much of a downside. You know, Rampage sticks around. If you threw a Rampage on it while it was damaged, when it becomes undamaged next turn, Rampage is still on it. It can heal off a Slam. It's I think really good synergy actually with Commanding Shout, because it can you know, it won't die. It's not going to die that turn, so you could run it into who the heck knows what, and it'll be fine. And if it survives your opponent's turn, then it heals back to full. It's not stuck at 1 health. Commanding Shout's legacy is that it leaves your minions at 1 health a lot, especially when you're doing Commanding Shout and then a bunch of like Wild Pyromancer stuff to like wipe the board out. It sucks because your board afterwards is always pretty weak because it's all 1 health stuff. Well, this is going to be a 1/4 health kind of thing. You know, maybe it can come just like Forked Lightning with Shaman. Cleave is a random warrior card, right? So maybe it can come in and finish off maybe that minion you didn't hit with Cleave, or maybe you hit the 3. Maybe there was a 2 health, a 2 health, and a 3 health, right? And your Cleave hit the 2 health and the 3 health, and you're like, oh, okay, well, you can send it in and finish it. Because of the higher health, you know, it's more likely to be able to take damage and survive. You know, eat maybe from a whirlwind, so Battle Rage might be able to be more of a thing with it, because I mean, you have to do it on the turn it gets hit, but the high health keeps it up a little more. Armorsmith, that's cool. And it does charge with Warsong Commander, but it's only the 1 attack, so it's not very exciting. Though it does sync up with Frothing Berserker pretty decent, right? Because Frothing Berserker is whenever a minion takes damage. It's not when a minion dies, like the Flesh-Eating Ghoul. It's whenever things take damage. If you had a good source, like say you were in a Paladin Mirror, right? A lot of times they'll like hero power for the turn. You know, if you could have this Gargoyle do damage to something and not die every turn, it's going to continually pump your Berserker, and your Gargoyle is going to get back to full every turn, so you could, you know, you could maybe get some value, get some good Berserker pumps out. It's pumping it 2 every time, right? It's damaging your Gargoyle, and it's damaging whatever it is that you're hitting on your opponent's side of the board, and it builds back up, so you know, your Berserker can get stronger there. I think that's it for Warrior. None of the other cards really do much. I mean, you would kill it with Mortal Strike if you did that. So Charge, yeah, turn into a 3/4. I mean, anything that buffs it is decent, right? And so that turns it into a 3/4 that regenerates itself. You know, you coin out. I don't know. I mean, you coin out Stoneskin on turn 2, and you drop Charge on turn 3. You don't get the charge advantage, sure, but having a 3/4 on like turn 3, turn 4 that regenerates its health. Okay, okay, I get down with that. In general, with the card, in summary, you can see it's not super exciting for really any class, because it's a card that is gonna maybe struggle to find its way in some decks, because one attack just realistically isn't that great of a thing. You'd have to invest a lot of buffs into it, and buffs are typically going to be a little weaker. Well, not a little weaker. Buffs are looked down upon a little bit in the Hearthstone community, certainly in ranked, because you can silence them, or you can kill that card, and now they've lost 2 cards, right? So class-wise, I think Paladin is what it syncs up with the best, just because of, it can give it permanent buffs, and it can do Sword of Justice stuff. It's great in the Paladin mirror. Paladin has the best things, I think, for it. Druid and Shaman are probably second. Druid because it can give it taunt, which is good, and it can give it, I mean, really it's just Mark of the Wild, right? You can give it taunt, you can give it more attack damage. Shaman can do that temporarily, so that's okay. That's okay too, right? And I put Warrior in the B list too for synergy. I put Paladin's A list. Shaman, Druid, and Warrior are going to be my B list. Warrior because it can take damage. They can buff it with Charge, Enraged, Krugelhead, Assmaster, and it doesn't see much of a downside from that, and it can pump the Berserker in there. Below that, Mage, maybe it can stretch the spell power just a little more because it's a minion that's typically going to be ignored. And then, bottom is going to be Priest, Rogue, Hunter. I don't see hardly anything here. Rogue, maybe Cold Blood. Priest, I mean, even your hero ability doesn't do much for this, right? It's just not really hardly anything in Priest. Hunter, not really anything in Hunter. No beast combos. It doesn't combo well with the traps that much at all. It doesn't really even combo that way with Hunter's Mark. So overall, a card that has a hard time finding its way into certain classes. Somebody, I'm sure, will make a deck that is where it's like awesome and like the key combo card to it, but I would kind of commend that person for being that creative with the game. Certainly more creative than how I can think about it right now. We'll just have to see. Smooth sailing, everybody. We'll see you next time.